Okay. Sorry. Just a moment. I'm trying to start my camera again on the system. Okay. Can you all see me now? Right. Thank you very much. I was talking about Plato's Republic. Now, secondly, I want to tell you that the first important theory by Plato in the Republic was his cave allegory. And in the cave allegory, he was talking about the caveman who lived in the caves in the ancient times, in prehistorical ages. And on the cave walls, they could only see the shadows of people, the shadows of themselves, and the shadows of outside world. And when they were doing so, they always believed in the shadows on the walls, not the reality itself, but only the shadows, because those shadows were the illusions of whatever there is outside. And when they saw the reality outside, they were scared of the reality because they preferred the illusion itself, because it was safer, it was easier to believe, but the reality was more dangerous. So they reserved themselves from it. They stepped back. They stepped back from the reality and they preferred the illusion. In today's world, the big billboards, huge billboards and advertisements outside are the cave allegory, today's cave allegory. Because sometimes you see the big picture of a hamburger, huge, fat, juicy. It looks delicious there. But when you go and buy it, it is thinner, dry, tasteless, smaller, not as beautiful as it looks in the pictures. So you prefer the illusion rather than the reality. And you do not like the reality, so you start believing in the illusions. Plato, about art, Plato thinks that art creates illusions. Okay, art creates illusions. Poetry creates illusions. In this lesson, whenever I say poetry, please think of literature. Because back then, in Plato's time, poetry was the only form of literature. Because poetry was written in lines, poetry was written in a certain measure, poetry was written in a certain rhyme scheme. So it was easier to memorize, easier to understand. Not maybe understand, but it was easier to memorize because it wasn't possible to multiply the copies by the printing machine. So people heard it and could recite it somewhere else. So this is why it was easier to memorize. So even drama was written in the form of poetry. And because of that, he was always using the term poetry when he talked about literature. So we can always convert this term into literature when we talk. But I will say poetry again. He says that poetry causes illusions, poetry causes imitations. And in old, ancient Greek, he calls this not imitation, but he calls it mimesis. Mimesis means mimicry. It comes from mimicry, mimesis, mimicry, and it means imitation, representation. There's always representation in art. Art cannot occur without representation. Art cannot happen without a representation. What do we do when we wake up in the morning? Do we come to the work or do we come to the school just out of the bed as we are? No, we change our clothes, we at least wash our face, put on some makeup, or maybe shave, so we go out. This is a representation, a form of representation, because we give ourselves a shape. We give ourselves a shape, and we say that this is how we want to be seen in the society. This is how we want to be considered by people. Okay, so this is my shape, and I give myself a shape to appear to you. So this is why representation is important. Okay. On the other hand, when Plato was talking about representation, mimesis, he thought that this is not good, because mimesis is not the reality. All right. Of course, this is not my real face. I shave, clean, so cut my hair, and then I appear to you. But this is not real me. See me in a different way. Okay, so I give myself an identity. I give myself a shape all the time. This is what we always do. So don't we say that people wear masks, metaphorical masks, of course. We always wear a mask in the society. We smile to the people whom we hate. Don't we? We do that. Or we lie. Plato wanted the truth. He said that poets must talk about the truth. His example for imitation or mimesis was his famous example of a bat. He wanted the original idea of a bat, and he said that God has given us the original idea of a bat. The original truth, the original idea only belongs to God. God gives us the original idea, he says. And when the carpenter makes a bat, he only imitates that original idea given by God. So the first product, the first carpenter, whoever first made the bat, imitated the original idea, according to him. And then the second carpenter, who saw the bat and who imitated the bat in his own interpretation, okay, second move away from the reality, second move away from the original truth. Then, what happened? If a writer or a painter makes a picture of a bat, okay, then what we see here is the third move away from reality. The third move away from reality, you see? We are removed from it for the third time when the artist puts his finger into that. This is called, in modern literary theory, this is called defamiliarization. I'm writing it here for you to see. Defamiliarization. Okay? Familiar. Familiar. Okay? Familiar is something identical, something, recognizable by us. Defamiliar, make something defamiliar. Defamiliarize means make something unfamiliar. Defamiliarization means making something unfamiliar. Right? Unfamiliar. So, I always use some of my mugs, some of my coffee cups as pen holders. I put pen holders in them. In my office desk, you can see a coffee mug full of pens and pencils. All right? It's a defamiliarization because it's no more a coffee cup. It's no more a coffee cup, but it's a pen holder. Was it actually a pen holder? Originally, it's a coffee cup. But I no more use it as a coffee cup, I use it as a pen holder. So which one is it? Is it a pen holder or a coffee mug? Okay, this is defamiliarization. The original idea is a coffee mug, but I defamiliarize it and use it as a pen holder. And no one calls it a coffee mug anymore. And I don't call it a coffee mug anymore. I call it a pen holder now. This is what we do, right? This is what we do. And surely in literature there's always a defamiliarization all the time. And Plato wanted the truth. He was talking about the poet Homer, and he says that when Homer was writing about the Trojan War, the War of Troy, he said that Homer wrote about the pains, sufferings, death in the war. This is not the ideal truth, according to him. Not the ideal truth, because it scares off the soldiers. It makes the soldiers afraid of going to war. Instead, an ideal truth should be glorification of it. Talk about victory, talk about the joy of it, talk about the glory. All right? And then, if you do so, then the soldiers will be more encouraged to go to war. So my example for it is the ideal truth. If ideal truth belongs to God, according to him, artistically, the ideal truth in a country belongs to the state. So the state imposes upon us an ideal truth. When you talk about the bad things in a war, then it's not the ideal truth. People die. Of course people die. Of course people die in a war. But the ideal truth says that victory, glory, winning the war, all right, is important. Right? Therefore, he knew the power of poets. He knew the power of poets, and he thought that the poets can change the minds of young people. Poets can change even the religious beliefs. Poets can change even the governments. Okay? For example, especially young minds, he said, young minds can be easily affected by poetry. The poets can easily affect the young minds. So this is why poetry should be kept under control, according to Plato. And when will we have free art? He says that when the assembly is full of scientists and philosophers, and when the whole society is very well educated, then we can have free art and free literature, totally. But now we cannot. Because now another example that I want to give you is the primetime television. Primetime television is always under control. It's always under control. It's always under censorship all the time. There is censorship on primetime television. Because imagine after your dinner, you watch a film with the family. Okay, all family members are there, and you're watching a film on junkies, for example. So the state wants to control this, because if you watch a film on junkies, no one knows what is going to happen tomorrow. You don't know what part of the society will be influenced badly, negatively about it. So there's a category called family films. Family films, very beautiful category. Okay, there's strong censorship on that. Smoking cannot be seen on television, or drinking alcohol cannot be seen on television. It's blurred all the time. They don't show it. Okay, so this is why I call it censorship, because there are so many parts of the society in so many different places, and we do not know what kind of people will be affected negatively by what we show on television. So it had to be under control all the time. On the other hand, there's censorship all the time. Wherever there is a government, wherever there is a state, there's always censorship. And this censorship doesn't only occur legally and isn't only practiced by the governments. The market, the capitalist market, applies its own censorship system. How? If you go to DNR, for example, a DNR store, at the entrance of the DNR store, you can find the most popular books, best-selling books only, not the extreme radical books. If you ask the name of a radical author, let's say ask for Marx in DNR, they don't say it that they don't have it in stock. They have it in stock, but they may not have it in the store. They order it for you, but you cannot find it in the store. You may not find it in the store. Or even if you may find it in the store, you will find philosophical books and radically political books in the back shelves at the end of the store. You see what I mean? This is a kind of censorship. And the publishers may not want to publish if you have radical texts. Okay, they may not want to publish it because it doesn't sell. So the publishers are looking for texts which can be sold easily. Okay, so this is a kind of censorship too. And therefore, on primetime television, you cannot watch extreme violence. You cannot watch eroticism on primetime television. You cannot watch people drinking alcohol on primetime television. If you want to see them, you have to pay to special channels like Netflix, maybe. You have to buy the DVD of the films. But if it's free television without paying, then everything is censored, everything is controlled, under control, so that the society is kept under control. This is a Platonic system. Okay, Plato suggested this system. But however, he had a theory about art. He had a theory about art, which we are going to read next week when you download the book. He had a theory about art. He had a point to do that because art defamiliarizes things. Art makes things unfamiliar. Poetry makes things unfamiliar, and poetry can easily change the minds of the people. And in most of the military coup d'etat, if they are successful, of course. The last one was not successful on the 15th of July, 4 years ago. It wasn't successful, but I remember the successful military coups in the past, in 1980, for example. So many poets were arrested. Okay, so poets were arrested. Maybe they were among the first people to be arrested by the army, by the police force, because they were powerful. What they wrote had a powerful effect on the young people. This is why we always face censorship. Any questions so far? Okay, Deniz is writing. It still continues, actually. Yes, you're correct. And most of the totalitarian regimes, autocratic regimes, or dictatorships in the 20th century, and still even in the 21st century now, in the 21st century now, they practiced some Platonic principles of ruling a state. Okay? They did that, unfortunately, like in the Soviet Union or in the other autocratic states, totalitarian states and dictatorships. Okay, now I'm closing this session. Next week, please watch my video for the second week, and also download the book Republic from the internet, and I'm going to read book 10 with you next week. Okay, any questions? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm closing this session now.